he says, I came across a Unitarian and he showed me Revelation 3:14, which I replied, God can't be created. But I don't understand why it's sounding like that in the verse. Could you elaborate on that? Okay, so on Revelation 3:14, there's actually a number of different translations. I'm not sure which translation you were shown. So let me just let me pull up a variety, and then I'll comment on what the actual Greek text indicates. Yeah, so you were likely there's two translations, two different ways of rendering this that sometimes people will interpret a certain way. Basically, here's the verse. I'll post. Well, I'll just cite it for you in the new. Actually, I can pull this up on my screen. So this is the New International Version. It says, to the angel of the church in Laodicea write, these are the words of the Amen, the faithful and true witness, the ruler of God's creation. Okay, that's not likely the translation that you were given. That one doesn't cause anyone to stumble, right? It says the ruler of God's creation. Okay, but another translation says, write this letter to the angel of the church in Laodicea, and there it says, the faithful and true witness, the beginning of God's new creation. Okay, now this is obviously a paraphrase. There's no word for new in the Greek. I can already tell you that first off. But this phrase, the beginning, okay, that can throw you. That's even used in the English Standard Version, where it says the beginning of God's creation. Okay, you have it also in the Berean Literal Bible, the beginning of God's creation. Okay, you have it in the New American Standard, the beginning of God's creation. Okay. Now, the question is, how is this term being used? Well, because the word can mean, let me get back to my thing here. The word can mean origin in the sense of the one who is the source of the creation. And that's how the word beginning is being used. He's the beginning of the creation of God. Okay. But when somebody uses the phrase beginning, when an Arian uses that, people think, oh, he's the beginning. He's the first thing God made. That's not what it's saying. It's not saying he's the first thing created. He's not saying the beginning of creation in that sense, but the beginning in the sense that he's the origin, the begetter of creation. The same word, the beginning, is used for God the Father elsewhere in the book of Revelation when it says that he is the beginning and the end, right? It's the same word, okay? The beginning and the end. Does that mean that God was created, right? Nobody would say that, right? Jehovah's Witnesses wouldn't say that, okay? So the basic fact is that this word most certainly doesn't demand understanding it as a reference to Jesus as having a beginning in the sense of a creaturely beginning, but rather to him as the beginning, as the first, as the source and origin of things. Another way the term is used is simply in the sense of ruler, right? The term is arche, and it means ruler. In fact, I'll show you here. Let me share my screen again, and I'll just show that to you in the Greek. So here it is again. This is Revelation 3:14. If you go up to the Greek text, it says, let's see if I can blow that up. It says, Hearche tes tiseos tu theou. Okay, the beginning, Hearche tes tiseos tu theou, of the creation of God. Okay, now you go back to if you go to the interlinear here, it'll show you the word that's used. The word that's used here is arche. Here's the Greek word. Here is the transliteration, arche. Now, what does this word mean? You go here, look what it means. Okay, I wish I could. Sometimes it doesn't allow me. There we go. Here's what the word means: rule, kingly, or magisterial. In the plural, in a quasi-personal sense, almost rulers, magistrates, beginning. Okay, so you have three translation possibilities. It's used in the sense of rule. In the plural, it's used of rulers or magistrates, and then it can also be used in the sense of beginning. But notice that it can have, see, every word has not only a denotative meaning, but a connotative meaning. Okay, so the denotative meaning can be beginning in certain contexts, but it would have the connotation. Notice what it says here: properly from the beginning, in either a temporal sense, or it's used as the initial starting point. So figuratively, what comes first and therefore is chief or foremost. That is, has the priority because head of the rest, preeminent. Okay, so you see that the word in Revelation 3 doesn't indicate that Jesus is somehow less than fully God. Okay, these people are simply capitalizing on the idiosyncrasy of an English translation where a word could be taken in a certain way, but doesn't have to be taken that way. And I would argue contextually it can't be taken that way, right? Notice what he's called in the whole verse. The whole verse, notice what it says: to the angel of the church in Laodicea write, the Amen. Okay, the Amen. Jesus is calling himself the Amen. What does that idea mean? Okay, the word Amen is a term ratifying, confirming the truth of something. Whenever somebody would end a prayer in the Old Testament and agree to it, they were supposed to ratify it with their word Amen. They were setting their stamp of approval, saying this is true. Well, Jesus is claiming to be the Amen, the truth. Okay, and that's why it goes on to say, the faithful and true witness, the beginning of the creation of God. I know your deeds, that you're neither cold nor hot. Okay, Jesus is saying, I know what you do. I know your actions. I'm aware of all that you're doing. In fact, in the letters to the 7 churches, Jesus talks about his eyes being a flame of fire. It's speaking about his omniscience. He says, I know your heart, right? So the picture of Jesus here in the 7 letters and throughout the book of Revelation is that Jesus is the eternal one. In fact, if you go back to Revelation 1, the same terms that are used for God are given to Jesus. The Father is called him who is and who was in verse 4. Jesus is called him who is and who was and who is to come in verse 8. The Father is called the Alpha and the Omega in various places in Revelation. Jesus is called the Alpha and the Omega. Father's called first and last. Jesus is called first and last. The Father's called the beginning and the end. Jesus is called the beginning and the end. In Revelation 5:13, Jesus is given universal worship, the same worship that's given to the Father. The book of Revelation is one of the last places any Unitarian should ever want to go if they want to try and argue against the deity of Christ.